we look at things this year from a forecast standpoint in mortgage lending, right now rates are low. I know you touched on before where rates at. We're still seeing 30-year fixed rates at no points with your A borrower in the high 2% on 30-year fixes. Some of that might be discounting, off your rate sheet. Some might be kind of, thinner margins, if you will. But rates are still so low. So from an affordability index, it's a great time to buy. I do a lot of monitoring of rates. I subscribe to a lot of sites, whether it's the Mortgage Market Guide or the Mortgage Banking Highway. So there's a lot of sites that I pull from that really monitor. Those are those sites' jobs. And so since I'd say January 3rd, we came in after the holiday and rates were low. They'd been kind of consistent for 90 days. Since then, they've kind of spiked up. We've probably lost about 3/8 in rate, which is a pretty big amount in a short amount of time. Probably in 2 weeks, we've lost 0.375 in rate. So why is that happening? Well, one, the Fed has come out all the way from the top and said they're going to start tapering. So tapering,
what is that?
So tapering. So if you look back last year, the Fed was essentially keeping rates artificially low. What they were doing was they were buying about $120 billion every month in mortgage-backed securities and treasury securities and mortgage bonds, and that was securitizing rates on the secondary market. They have come back and said we're going to start tapering and buying less. So I think as of last November, about 2 or 3 months ago, they started buying $60 billion. So they cut that $120 billion in half. When they start tapering and pulling back, rates start to drift up a little bit. When you also add inflation is supposed to be at a 40-year high. If you look at gas prices and other things, that also has impact. There's an old saying, weaker than expected economic data, rates get better. Positive economic data, rates get worse. So if there's a really favorable jobs report, rates might go up because it shows strength in the economy. So you're exactly right. And I watch a lot of the key economic indicators. They call them high impact indicators each week. And we can kind of see, where things are coming out, and it has a direct correlation with interest rates. But if you look at the 10-year Treasury, it closed just under 1.8 on Friday. That's a key barometer for mortgage rate movement. The bond market, which is probably the most retroactive for mortgage rate retrenchment, that's been in the tank. We've probably lost, I'd say 175 basis points since January 3rd, which is what's leading into that 0.375 uptick in interest rates. So now a lot of us in the mortgage community are kind of seeing what's going to happen next. Are we going to pull back a little bit? Are we going to kind of hover here now? So when you think about rates, you think of kind of a floor and a ceiling. They'll usually kind of bounce between a 50 to 200-day moving average. And once they cross that ceiling or go below that floor, then they might find a new level to bounce between. So all eyes are kind of on everything now. But I think to summarize the mentality, rates are very low. I think we talked about my first house I bought in 2009. Pretty sure the rate on a 7/1 ARM was 6.875%. So,
and when my parents bought their first home, it was 15%.
Yeah, so it puts it in perspective. And you could even pull up where have rates been the last 10 years. They've been a lot higher than they are now.
That's true.
Most of the experts in the financial world say that in a perfect economy, interest rates should be between probably 4 and 6% because it shows, like you said, intuitively a lot of strength in our world. And I do a lot of studying because I want to know more than the consumer. I want to educate realtors like yourself. I want to be in the know. So really the collective median for interest rate movement this year, and I'll pick one analyst. I'll pick Dr. Lawrence Yun.
Oh, he's a great guy.
He's great. He's been the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, so kind of in all of our worlds, in yours and mine. He's predicting rates to be up to about 3.75, so up roughly 3/4 of a point.
By the end of the year,
by year's end. Right. Goldman Sachs came out with a report last week. They predict 4 short-term rate increases by the end of the year. So when you say short-term rate increases, the Federal Reserve meets 8 times a year. They're a committee of 12 people, and they basically look at monetary policy change, and they make up these different changes. So they look at raising or holding rates on short-term rates. It's called the Fed's fund rate, or even prime. Prime is tied to more short-term rates, meaning lines of credit.
I've heard words like the LIBOR index. Things tied to that. Is that part of it?
So the LIBOR is the London Interbank Offering Rate, which is more tied to ARM loans. So like your hybrid ARMs, your 5, 7, and 10-year, fixed period. After that, then they usually go to what's called the fully indexed rate, which is the margin plus the index, which is usually the LIBOR.
Yeah.
The LIBOR is the chief index that's used in.
And I know we're kind of getting into the weeds on that, but so by the end of the year, though, most of the analysts thinks we might be at around 3.7, 3.8, something around that.
That's what we're seeing, And I think, even with that, values are supposed to go up. They're supposed to keep climbing because rents, if you look at, rents have gone up over 19% nationally this year and up 9.2% in the last 6 months. That's pretty high.